The day I found out my husband had forged my signature on our divorce papers, I was standing in a lawyer's office holding a check for $35 million. And the first thing I felt wasn't rage. It was relief. Because for the first time in 11 years, I finally understood exactly who Daniel really was. My name is Claire Whitfield. And I used to believe that love meant giving someone the benefit of the doubt, even when your gut was screaming at you to stop. I met Daniel when I was 26, working as a paralegal in Chicago. Barely making rent, still paying off student loans. He was charming in that quiet, attentive way, the kind of man who remembered how you liked your coffee after the second date. I fell hard. Not because he had money, because he didn't, not back then. I fell for him because he made me feel like I was the only interesting person in any room we walked into. We got married 2 years later in a small backyard ceremony. My grandmother, Eleanor, walked me down a row of folding chairs and whispered in my ear, "Marry someone who loves you more than they love what you can give them." I remember laughing it off. I thought I already had that dart for the first few years. Things were good. Not perfect, but good. Daniel worked in commercial real estate. I moved up into a legal operations role at a mid-sized firm. We built a life that looked, from the outside, exactly like the American dream. A townhouse in Lincoln Park, 2 dogs, Sunday dinners with his parents, but somewhere around year 7, something in him changed. Or maybe it had always been there. And I just hadn't been paying attention. My grandmother Eleanor had built a modest fortune over 60 years. She'd started a small manufacturing company out of a garage in the 1970s. And by the time she passed, it had grown into something worth far more than any of us realized. She never talked about money. She wore the same wool coat for 20 winters. Nobody in the family knew what she was actually worth, including me. Daniel started asking about her more. Small questions at first. How's your grandmother's health? Does she still handle her own finances? Do you know who her lawyer is? I told myself he was just being caring. Attentive husbands ask questions like that. That's what I told myself. Anyway, then, about 8 months before everything fell apart, Daniel started acting distant. Working later, taking calls in the garage with the door shut. When I asked what was going on, he'd say the same thing every time. Work stress, Claire. It's nothing. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. That's the thing nobody tells you about betrayal. It doesn't usually announce itself. It creeps in through the cracks of your own hope. In March, my grandmother passed away peacefully in her sleep. I was devastated, but I also felt something I wasn't prepared for, the quiet, aching comfort of Daniel holding me at the funeral, whispering that he'd take care of everything, that I didn't need to worry about a thing. I should have paid closer attention to how quickly he said everything. 3 weeks after the funeral, I got a call from my grandmother's estate attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Patricia Nolan. She asked me to come in alone. When I sat down across from her desk, she slid a folder toward me and said 4 words that changed my life. "Your husband filed first." I didn't understand at first. Patricia explained that 2 weeks before my grandmother's estate was set to formally clear probate, before the $35 million inheritance was legally mine, Daniel had filed for divorce, quietly, quickly, and using a signature on the joint filing documents. That was supposedly mine. I'd never signed those papers. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the folder. Patricia, sensing I was about to fall apart, said something I'll never forget. "Claire, I've seen this before. Some people marry for love. Some people wait for money. And some people are patient enough to do both at the same time until the money shows up." Daniel had learned, through a slip from his cousin who worked in insurance, roughly what my grandmother's estate was actually worth months before I did. And instead of telling me, instead of standing beside me through my grief, he'd quietly consulted a divorce attorney to try to finalize our split before the inheritance legally became marital discovery, timing it so that, in his mind, none of it would ever be considered something I owned during our marriage that he could be excluded from. He wanted out fast, and he wanted it done before anyone, including me, understood what was actually at stake. The cruelest part wasn't even the money. It was the forgery. It was realizing that the man who held my hand at my grandmother's funeral had, at the very same time, been quietly plotting how to walk away from me with something that was never his to take. I sat in my car outside that law office for almost an hour. I didn't cry the way I expected to. I just felt this strange, cold clarity settle over me, like fog lifting off a lake at dawn. I thought about my grandmother's voice. "Marry someone who loves you more than they love what you can give them." She'd known. Somehow, even without meeting Daniel at his worst, some part of her had known to warn me. I didn't confront Daniel that night. I did something smarter. I called Patricia back the next morning and asked her one question. "Is forging my signature a crime?" It was, which meant Daniel hadn't just made a mistake. He had committed forgery to try to steal from me before I even knew there was anything to steal. I spent the next 6 weeks building my case quietly, the same way Daniel had built his. I gathered emails. I found the burner phone records his cousin Slip had led me to. I hired my own attorney, a woman named Renata Cole who specialized in exactly this kind of situation, spouses who tried to weaponize timing against their partners. And I let Daniel believe, for those 6 weeks, that nothing had changed. I smiled at dinner. I asked about his day. I let him think he'd gotten away with it. People sometimes ask me later if that was manipulative. Maybe it was. But I'd learned something important during those weeks. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't screaming the truth the moment you find it. It's staying calm long enough to make sure the truth actually wins. The confrontation happened on a Tuesday evening in our kitchen. Daniel came home to find Renata Cole sitting at our dining table, along with a folder containing the forged signature, the handwriting analysis confirming it wasn't mine, and a formal notice that the divorce filing was being challenged on grounds of fraud. I watched his face change in real time. The charm drained out of it. What was left underneath was something colder, something I'd never let myself see before. Claire, I can explain, you don't have to, I said. I already know. I've known for 6 weeks. He tried anger next. Then he tried the thing men like Daniel always try last. Sadness, apology, the sudden rediscovery of how much he loved me. I let him talk. And then I told him the truth as calmly as I've ever said anything in my life. You didn't want a wife, Daniel. You wanted a payout with a woman attached to it. And the moment you thought you could get the payout without the woman, you tried to forge your way there. The legal fallout took almost a year. Because of the forgery, the divorce filing was voided entirely, which meant I controlled the terms of how and when it happened, not him. My grandmother's inheritance, properly documented as separate property received after the initial filing attempt, was protected in full. Daniel walked away with almost nothing beyond what he'd brought into the marriage and a fraud allegation that followed him into every future relationship he tried to build. The last time I saw Daniel was in a courthouse hallway, nearly a year after that Tuesday evening. He looked smaller somehow, like the confidence had been a costume he could no longer afford to wear. He asked if I was happy. I told him the truth. I'm free. That's better than happy. Happy fades. Free doesn't. I used part of my inheritance to start a foundation in my grandmother's name, supporting women rebuilding their lives after financial abuse and betrayal, women who, like me, had once mistaken someone's patience for love, not realizing they were simply waiting for the right moment to take what wasn't theirs. Looking back now, I understand something I couldn't see while I was living through it. Betrayal doesn't usually arrive with a warning. It arrives disguised as comfort, as timing, as someone conveniently there in your worst moments for reasons you never thought to question. But here's what I learned, and what I hope you carry with you if you ever find yourself in a similar storm. The people who truly love you never need to calculate the cost of loving you. And if someone shows you, through their actions, exactly who they are, believe them the first time, even if it's inconvenient. Even if it breaks your heart to admit it. My grandmother spent 60 years building something quietly, patiently, without ever needing anyone to notice. In the end, it wasn't just money she left me. It was proof that patience and integrity outlast every shortcut someone else tries to take at your expense. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own strength, or someone you love, make sure you're subscribed. There are so many more stories like this one waiting for you. Stories about betrayal, resilience, and the quiet, powerful moment when someone finally turns the tables and takes their life back.